Hello, this is Jeremy Roos, Chief Revenue Officer for FreeVolt USA. And today we're going to talk about one of the biggest questions in solar. Lease versus purchase. Do you want to lease a solar system or do you want to purchase a solar system? Now, to be fair, I have sold both in my career. I've been in solar for a while. I have sold plenty of leases. But in the last few years, I have only sold purchases. And it's because I learned more about the product and also worked with a lot of realtors, which helped me formulate my opinions, and then also found out some incredibly, I don't want to say horrific, but pretty bad things when it comes to leases and the potential drawbacks. So first, we're going to talk about net metering first. I just want to make sure that everybody understands net metering. Net metering is a billing mechanism that credits solar energy system owners for the electricity that they add to the grid. From 1996 through July 1st, 2017, in California, we were under the original net metering program. Even exchange, 1 kilowatt hour for 1 kilowatt hour. We send the utility a kilowatt hour, they owe us one at night. Obviously, the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. That's why they have the net metering program. It's an annual program. You settle up at the end of the year. There's a set rate for the credit, and then you pay for the excess used based on whatever kilowatt hour rate that it was at the time. And everybody was on a tiered system, tiered rate plan at this point with the utility. So just to give you an example, if a home used 15,000 kilowatt hours per year, solar produces 15,000 kilowatt hours per year, they're going to have a true-up bill of zero. Now, that's a very simplistic way to explain it. There's a little bit more to that. They might actually have a slight credit. They might have a slight bill. It's almost impossible to be exact, but that's the basic premise, and so it's important to understand that as a baseline. True-up is the settlement amount due at the end of the year on the anniversary of when the system was turned on. Then, Net Metering 2.0, which is from July 1st, 2017 until now. Everyone who goes solar has to be on a time of use rate plan. There's non-bypassable charges, there's a solar connection fee, and there's a minimum charge each month. The credits and charges are based on the cost of energy at the time. Homeowners who previously broke even would have a true-up bill of approximately $170. That's not too bad. It still makes a ton of sense. But then March 1st, 2019 came along. Edison changed its time of use rates, still on Net Metering 2.0, but now the rates were flipped. So here's what the previous rates looked like over here on the left side. From 8 a.m. to noon, 26 cents, noon to 6 p.m., 45 cents, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 26 cents, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., 12 cents. Now, when you're in that scenario, you're generating solar power during this time. And then when you have to buy power from the utility, you're buying it at this rate. So you're going to make more here to pay for this here. But when they flip the rates, now they put this noon to 6 p.m. back to 4 to 9 p.m. Now you're paying 40 cents per kilowatt hour during that time, but you're only getting 25 cents when you generate it. So that means that they're going to buy your power for 25 cents and then sell it back to you for 40 cents. So in 2018, if you would have installed a 7.5 kilowatt system with 100% offset, you'd be at a $170 annual Edison bill. 2019, that same system with that same offset, you're going to end up with about a $450 annual Edison bill. And it could vary. It'd be anywhere from $250 all the way up to $600. I just kind of split the difference at $450. So why is this crucial when you're considering a purchase versus a lease? Well, keep in mind, savings over time are significantly less when you lease a solar system. You're going to have to pay the utility something. So the goal is to get that payment as low as possible. And then when you lease a system, though, you're always going to have that payment to the solar company to go with that utility payment. When you purchase a system, that's not necessarily the case. So let's go through the numbers. So this is a straight cash purchase versus a lease. You can see the cost of the system. In this situation, we're doing an 8.7 kilowatt system, $29,000. That's your cash price. Now, obviously, you got to pay that out of pocket. The lease, you don't. Okay, but here's the deal. Now there's no payment because you purchased it with cash. whereas a lease, you've got a $210 payment. The Edison true-up bill will just say for this scenario is $300 at the end of the year. That's going to be the same on both. Now look at the tax credit. Now some people sell the lease because they say you can't get the tax credit. Well, the tax credit's a little bit more complex than that. Most people can take advantage of at least a portion of it. And even if you take it out of the equation, which we can do here in a second, it still makes sense to purchase the system. So your total net payments with the tax credit included is $21,486. But even if we stick with this $29,035, that's still significantly less than the $50,000 you're going to pay over 20 years with the lease. Edison total over the same time is roughly the same. It'll be exactly the same in this scenario. And the total energy cost, so this factors in the tax credit, so $27,486 versus $56,400. So over the next 20 years, do you want to pay $27,000 or do you want to pay $56,000? And for those of you who are looking at things like return on investment and that sort of thing, if you buy a system with cash, your return on investment will be anywhere from 5 to 7 years, depending on how efficient the system is. And we'll cover that in just a minute. Okay, but let's say you don't have cash. So now, let's do a finance purchase versus a lease. So same system, everything is the same on the lease side. The difference is here in the purchase. So there's a little bit of a cost to get the money from the finance company, that's fine. Now this is with a 3.99% 20-year loan. That's a pretty common loan in the solar industry, 3.9% over 20 years. It's going to get you a payment of $202 per month. So already in this scenario, it's less than this lease payment. Now I am utilizing an actual customer for these numbers, and we'll get to the reason why our numbers are less than the lease in just a minute, but it has to do with the efficiency of the system. So your tax credit in this scenario is $8,581. That's based off of this amount. So, if you take this amount here, shoot, that's a pretty good discount. But now let's look at the total net payments. So 240 payments, minus the tax credit, you're looking at $39,899, which is about $10,000 less than the lease. And then when you factor in the Edison payments, your total energy cost is $45,899 versus $56,400. Even if you add this $8,500 back in here, you're still going to be lower than this amount over 20 years. And this is a zero out of pocket. You don't have to pay anything to start, and you just start making these payments. Now, this will not be true with all purchases on the straight economics of this scenario. This is kind of exclusive to FreeVolt and is based on the efficiency of our graphene panels. We are the only company in the world with a patent on graphene in solar panels. So we are the only company that can really offer something like this. But even if it wasn't us, I'm going to show you what happens with a lease that should scare the heck out of anybody looking to lease a solar system. So purchase versus lease. Paying off or buying out a lease or PPA. So up here, let's go back up here. There is no penalty for an early payoff of a finance purchase. You sell the house, you can pay off the remaining balance of this original loan, whatever that may be. I didn't even get into the tax credit and how you can put that back towards the loan. I'm not trying to confuse anybody. I want to keep this as simple as possible. So there's no penalty. You can pay it off anytime. For most leases, that's just not available. But if you push hard enough, you can get a buyout from your lease company. But let's figure out, how do they calculate that? So most companies don't allow it. We already said that. And you're paying for power, not the cost of the system. So if you buy, or if you lease a system, when you sign the contract to lease the system, they might tell you that after 5 years, the system can be purchased at fair market value. And I didn't put that in here. I probably should have, but fair market value. To me, as a consumer, that would mean, hey, whatever is left in the value of the system, because the system was originally $30,000 and we've had it for 5 years, we'll pay, whatever minus the 5 years of wear and tear on the system. So it should be what, like $25,000, $20,000, whatever it is. But that's not how they do it. They calculate it based on the power the system is anticipated to produce. So it's based on the remaining warranty. So if you have panels that are warranted for 25 years, they're going to use that as the useful life of the system when they calculate fair market value. They're going to multiply that by the kilowatt hour rate, which depending on the solar lease, and again, not all solar leases are created equal. Some are better than others, but some of them will actually calculate that fair market value of the kilowatt hour rate based on the utility rate minus 10%. Especially if you have an escalating lease. An escalating lease is designed to kind of be right behind where the utility goes in the future. If you have that, you can end up paying a much higher price than you anticipated. So let's do a scenario, because that's the best way to show this. We're going to use that same 8.7 kilowatt system that we used in the above graphic, producing 16,444 kilowatt hours per year. If your lease PPA rate, power purchase agreement is similar to a lease for this particular exercise, they might as well be the same thing. Let's say it's 16 cents per kilowatt hour. That's actually a really good lease rate. If somebody has that in front of you and leasing is your only option, which in some places it might be, that's a great rate to take. But 16 cents per kilowatt hour, okay? There's a $219 a month payment if you do it at that rate. And this is the same 16,444 kilowatt hours. So in year 5, the homeowner sells their home. The incoming buyer does not want to assume the lease. So let's talk about that real briefly. When a leasing company comes to your door, they probably knocked on your door to try to sell you a solar lease. They are going to tell you that if you ever sell your house, the lease can be transferred. Sounds simple, right? But what if that buyer does not want that lease? And that's one of the oldest questions when it comes to real estate and solar. And so that's why this is important to understand this. The seller requests a buyout from the leasing company because since they don't want to assume the lease, we've got to buy it out, right? The buyout is not based on the cost of the system, but rather the power produced. We talked about that. 16 cents per kilowatt hour. So let's look at that. How do they calculate it? Since they are in year 5 of a 20-year lease, they just have to pay off the rest of the payments, right? For some leases, yes. And there are a few that are that, and we already looked at the scenario of what those payments are over 20 years. It's higher than the purchase price. So even if you just pay off the remaining payments, you're paying more than the purchase price of the system. But some are calculated like this. Homeowners in year 5 of the lease, the panels have a 25-year linear performance warranty. So they'll produce power for 20 more years. So the homeowner will have to pay for 20 more years of power at once, wrapped up into the escrow of them selling their home. Factoring in degradation, that's about 312,000 kilowatt hours per year, over that 20 years. At 16 cents per kilowatt hour, that buyout is $49,989. So this is for a $30,000 system that's 5 years old, and to buy it out, you're paying almost $50,000. This is a real scenario. These incidents like this have happened to homeowners across the country. So now they own the system, great. If they would have just purchased it originally, it would have cost about $30,000 before any tax credits. So even if they couldn't take a tax credit, it would have cost them 30 grand. And, obviously we showed the purchase scenario and how the payments are pretty close to what they are for a lease, except if you have to buy it out, the terms are so much better. Solar loans, the majority of them, you just pay them off. There's no penalty. The good financing companies like Salal, Dividend, ELN, Loan Pal, Sunlight, all of these companies allow you to pay the loan off with no penalty. Much better than having to pay off a $30,000 system by paying $49,989. Again, this is just a sample scenario. This isn't necessarily from a real situation, but there are situations like this. This is really how they calculate it, and this is really what you have to pay. There's a great book that I read called Cutting the Cord, and actually, no, it's Breaking Up or Divorcing the Electric Company. That's the name of the book. Divorcing the Electric Company, and it talks about leases, and it outlines scenarios just like this. So it's not just me. So now they own the system, They could have bought it for $30,000, blah, blah, blah. This is a good scenario compared to some. Some leases go for a longer period of time, 25 years instead of 20, and they have an escalating rate, meaning the amount you pay for power goes up 2.9%, sometimes more, every single year. The actual kilowatt hour rate to pay off the system can be based on utility rates and not the solar rate, which would mean instead of paying 16 cents per kilowatt hour, you could end up paying, 25, 30 cents, depending on what the utility rate is at the time, depending on how the lease is written. So another reason we talked about why are we able to produce more power and get these low payments for you from FreeVolt is because we have graphene in our solar panels. We patented the use of graphene. It reduces the system cost by up to 20% because graphene can produce 20, sometimes even 40% more power than similar panels. And in this scenario, now this is a real scenario that I took from a proposal in terms of the calculations. The numbers are slightly off, but the ratios are the same. So we use 300 watt panels. Some people think that's small. We've got a competitor that 327 is their number. They've got 327 watt panels all day long. Same number of panels. Their system size is larger than ours because their panels are bigger. But they're producing about the same amount of power, but because that competitor has a high price per watt, they're looking at about $35,500 for the same system that we can get with us for about less than $30,000. So it's a pretty significant savings. Some people lease because they're concerned with maintenance. Since FreeVolt is the manufacturer as well as the installer, if there's a problem, we fix the system. Now, I can't speak for other dealers. Some of them are going to have a workmanship warranty and tell you to go to the manufacturer for the rest. But with FreeVolt, everything is covered under one warranty. And we warrant performance. So, that's important as well. Here's our warranty over here on the left side, 30 years, longer than all of these other warranties from all of these top solar companies. And then our performance guarantee after 25 years, we're significantly higher than all of those companies as well. So that means that your system is not just going to produce the power you need in year one, but it's going to produce the power you need for 25 to 30 years. Owning the system is the best option. Don't take our word for it. Ask any realtor how they feel about solar leases. And I do a lot of work with realtors. Most realtors have had at least one deal fall through because of the hassles of dealing with a solar lease. So if you go to buy a house and they got a solar lease and you're supposed to take over a payment of $300 per month, what if you don't use that much power and electricity? Do you really want to take on that lease? That's when you have to start negotiating buyouts, and that's when you end up paying almost twice as much as what the system is actually worth if you would have just purchased it to begin with. So, that's why for 99% of the scenarios out there, solar lease just does not make sense. And FreeVolt at this point, we might offer one at some point in the future just because there is a certain demographic that it does benefit. But for the majority of people in the United States of America, the solar lease doesn't make sense. Even if they cannot utilize the tax credit, it still does not make sense. Eat the tax credit, you're still going to pay less over the long run than you will with a solar lease. So if you got any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, this is Jeremy Roos, Chief Revenue Officer for FreeVolt. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. If you have any questions, there's my information. Thank you.